be in Bangkok. Good to be at this event. Glad to see Branded Residential getting its own event rather than being a panel or two at other conferences. Great. I think Simon somewhere in the audience. We always appreciate hotel conferences, including Branded Residential, but nice to have our own gig, right?
Absolutely.
And nice to be in Bangkok.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I just want to welcome all my panelists. I'll start from the other end. We have with us Noel Merainer from Rosewood, VP Development for Asia Pacific. Alexandra Yao, VP Branded Residential for IHG based in Singapore. And James Price, Senior Vice President with Four Seasons.
Based in London.
Based in London. Fantastic. So Hong Kong, Singapore, London. I think your mandate's global. Your mandate's a bit of everything.
Bit of everything.
A bit of everything. And Noel's decidedly focused on Asia Pacific. Yes. So I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation. Mm-hmm. Why don't we, we've done sort of intros and titles, and Noreen did a fantastic job of introducing me. So let's dive into it. Before we get started, I'd just love to get a really quick check on what does your Branded Residential business look like today? How many projects, properties do you have? And tell me what's the next big, interesting opening that we should look forward to. Noel, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Rosewood Hotels and Resorts and Residence Estate. Right now, we're at 37 hotels or 37 locations. Plus, we have 14 residential operations today. Our pipeline is another 28 locations and about 14 more residential projects in the development pipeline. Rosewood was established about 45 years ago in the U.S. We're in a different place in our growth trajectory versus some of my friends here. So 45 years ago in the U.S., we only really went global about 10 years ago. And in Asia, we're kind of the last to get to the party. We opened in Beijing in 2015, and we only came to Southeast Asia with our first openings in 2018, Hong Kong in 2019. So we're still new. But it's a very exciting time. We have a lot to offer in the residential space. We're not big, but we do have a great deal of experience there. We've been building up our team, and the prospects are incredible.
Excellent.
We're aggressively growing globally. Since I joined IHG about 3 years ago, we now have a global pipeline. We're focused around the world. IHG does branded residences across 8 of our brands. Through the acquisition of Six Senses Regent Kimpton, IHG did inherit quite a bit of branded residences. We have about 50 open under those acquisitions, and in the pipeline, we have more than double that we expect to see open coming in about 2 years. So we are definitely growing. We are also very focused regionally going forth. Originally, we started as a central business, and now we're putting resources into the regions to really support our owners that are coming to IHG for our branded residential component.
Okay, James?
So we have, we have currently 57 residential properties open around the world. Our 58th in Istanbul should open next week. And this year marks the 40th anniversary in which we've been in the residential space. So it was mentioned earlier on, I think, that some of the hospitality brands are maybe coming back into the market. In fact, we've been here for some time. So the first property we had was Boston in 1985. So 40 years down the track, we've accelerated growth. In the next 5 years, with signed projects in the pipeline, we expect to open another I would say 25 to 30 properties. Again, across all regions, very active in the Middle East. Americas remains very active for us. Europe is a very strong pipeline, but there are always delays in Europe, the challenges around planning, which we can maybe come on to. And then this is a market here where we definitely want to increase our footprint. So we're kind of proactively searching for opportunities in this region.
Okay. Really interesting mix. I mean, we'll start with you. Been in the business, residential business, 40 plus years. Noel on the other end, where it's a 40-plus-year-old brand, but the residential business is perhaps newer. That being said, a significant percentage of your portfolio, both open and pipeline, has a residential component.
We got into well, technically, The first, by some records, the first branded hotel residential product was the Carlisle in New York, which was 1929, which is a Rosewood hotel. But in contemporary times, we've gotten into the residential space in the early 90s. So we've been at it. We're not the biggest, and we're not the first necessarily, but our objective always is to be among the best.
Yeah, and I guess in IHG's case, it was really a transformative event with the acquisition of Regent and Six Senses, which pushed IHG in front of the stage.
Definitely. Those acquisitions definitely put IHG in front of the stage, and then IHG, our senior leadership, looked at this model and thought, this is great. So with that, with me coming to IHG, and we're really building up the business and taking the best practices from the 3 brands that we acquired and applying it going forth.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about markets, and I think, James, you touched on it, and you're comparing Asia to some of the other pockets that you also oversee. Well, thinking back to the stats that Rian showed us on the slide of what markets in Asia Pacific where they see activity, there was no real surprises there, I guess, in terms of what's active. We saw Thailand with a red box around it several times, Vietnam, India sort of come to the forefront. Does that match the hotspots in each of your worlds? And why don't we see names like Japan on that list yet? Is it a matter of the education that Bill referenced? Is it something else? Start with you, James.
I was going to go Japan first, in fact. So
go for it.
We have, I think it was mentioned, I think Jonathan mentioned, or Bill, sorry, mentioned Kyoto, which was a very successful project for us. And again, the price points that were achieved in that project were exceptional. At the time, it was the second highest value market for us, or second highest value property after 20 Grosvenor Square in London, achieving about $5,500 a foot. So that really took me by surprise, that market. That's given us a bit of a footprint there. We do have other hotels in Japan, but we want to grow the residential footprint. So we've got other properties in pipeline. So we do see opportunity there. And we like that market because, again, I think the price points are quite firm in a lot of the locations. There is great attention to detail around the design. You can really sort of deliver, as has been mentioned this morning, I think Jeff touched on it very well, that partnership that you have with the developer is key to everything. So finding developers with a shared vision, which we have in the Japan properties so far, with that attention to detail and making sure that you're realizing something which is just going to kind of increase the level that you're seeing in that market. That's what we want to do wherever we go. So that's one market certainly that we see a lot of growth for us. And then there are others as well. I think, we've barely scratched the surface. And I think in Four Seasons world, a lot of the projects that we've got through the region are actually quite historic projects. They've been in place for some time. So really having a kind of a new vein of opportunities is what we're striving for here. And I think, again, the mixed use and standalone thing has been touched on quite extensively this morning. There are opportunities in both sectors for us. And, just on the growth that I mentioned for us earlier on, historically, across those 57 properties, 8 of those are standalone for us, which are open and operating. As we look through to that pipeline of the next 25 to 30 in the next 5 years, we've got, I think, another 12 that are actually standalone properties. So we're pushing into that space quite actively. That means that we can open up other locations that are not right for a hotel, but absolutely are right for a residential community, whether that be a sort of an urban property or an out-of-town sort of larger horizontal community. So having a line of sight and a focus on the standalone growth is key for us, and it just opens up those markets further.
Yeah, I contrast that with, Noel, your position, because obviously both brands playing in that upper luxury space for all intents and purposes, a mono brand company. Does the hotspot that James described match?
I would actually, Japan was it for me as well. Again, we're the last to come to the party here. Four Seasons has been in the region for decades. And us we've been here more recently. So we have opened our first hotel in Japan just a few weeks ago. I've been spending a lot of time in Japan. We will have some news to come in Japan in the near future around more hotels, but also around residential. And I think Japan is, the perfect market for branded residential, not only for the reasons that James mentioned, but also from a buyer side. I think there should be excitement around Japan, just like there is in the hotel space. And Japan is the kind of place where people, especially in Asia, they spend so much, out of Hong Kong, people spend so much time in Japan. The notion of having a home there is just very natural. And then you marry that with the fact that you have a very strong, sophisticated, wealthy domestic market and great real estate developers. So Japan is exciting. I'd also say next door, Korea is also an exciting opportunity. We're under construction with Rosewood Hotel there. You'll have news as well about residential in that space, in that market. Very different than Japan. I think that's more of a domestic play. Very sophisticated, very brand-conscious consumers for whom amenitization is very important. So if you look at the fitness club culture around hotels or the private club culture there, and to marry that with residential, I think is a perfect combination.
Alex, are you going to give us some variety and fly the flag for Southeast Asia or any other Asian country?
So Thailand and Vietnam are still our two biggest markets in Asia Pacific. That's in line with the stats we saw this morning. And we are continuing to see growth in both those, right? Our demand for brand and residence in Asia Pacific still comes predominantly from Thailand and Vietnam. Japan is something that we have our eye on. We are also under negotiations for a couple of projects in Japan, so stay tuned for that. It is something, and I echo both James and what Noel said, is Japan has great development partners, sophisticated buyer markets, and the price point for Japan is also high, so we're really excited about that. But for us, is that. Another one for IHG is the Philippines. Right, we are getting quite a bit of inquiries from the Philippines. We are in negotiation for a couple of projects in the Philippines. So that one is a good market for us that we see. So generally, we're good. And that's for Asia Pacific. Then globally, we see quite a bit of market. I think our next biggest growth area would be the Mexico, Latin America, Caribbean area, right, with the Americans buying branded residences as holiday homes. And so that's a big target market for us as well.
So to sum it up, Japan's a huge opportunity, especially for luxury, fantastic development partners. There's an education process and a hand-holding process that you need to do, but it's almost sort of benefits you because you get to educate them the way you want to educate them, right?
Yes.
Which is fantastic. So if you contrast that a little bit with, let's say, more established markets where there's developers who have dipped their feet into, potentially even burnt their fingers with branded residential and maybe developed a level of knowledge and sophistication, which might make your lives a tiny bit more challenging. I want to touch on that. So this evolving owner sophistication in APAC, in particular in Southeast Asia, how is that forcing you to evolve your owner offering?
Right.
No.
Well, the challenge for us, and speaking more to the sort of North Asia area, we find that we're working with developers who actually have their own brand. Maybe they haven't, still branded residential, still relatively new here in Asia Pacific. So there are not many developers who, have worked with other brands. But we find that we are working with developers who might have their own brand. And so a lot of the discussion is, well, they want the hotel, and then they go, well, we're going to do our own residences. And you have to have a conversation to convince them of what we can bring to the equation, how we can elevate with their offering. When they have their brand already being so strong, and in some of these markets, they might be more conservative, a little bit reluctant to try something new. But a lot of my time is spent around those kinds of conversations, just really getting them to understand, what the proposition is, and it is an education. I find that the model really, it works well in Japan because there's a lot for us to learn from them. So working with an experienced residential developer, we get a lot of insight from them. So it's a really, great symbiotic relationship. But there are other markets as well. I think Australia is another place where it's a bit of a struggle to convince developers of the proposition. There's a lot of, just a lot of reluctance there. But we keep at it, and I think, you'll see the model you start to grow in that market as well.
James, you cover the entire globe. So how does what you see owners asking you for in APAC, how is that evolving, and how is that different from a Middle East or Europe or North America?
I think Noel's made a good point that we do come up with the same conversations where, developers are maybe looking to sort of push their own brand in this region a little bit more than others. The branded resi roots are obviously very deep and established in the Americas markets, and so it's a clearer proposition for people. In Europe also, I think it's sort of, is behind the curve in terms of understanding what the value proposition is. So there's quite a lot of education that's needed there. And traditionally, the buyers in Europe are fixed on certain locations, and actually the brand coming to it almost gets in the way of that sometimes. So you have to have the conversation. You have to kind of set out what that value proposition is. And I think that Bill said it well earlier. It's layering up a series of things. So it's real estate. So you start with location. So, when we're looking at properties, there are certain things that the project has to have that are right for us to get on board. Being a good location, site qualities, obviously kind of architecture, whether it be, a heritage building or sort of in landmark architecture, there's an ability to sort of, create something amazing. Or the space planning in the units, the amenity program being right-sized, and we can talk about that a little bit because there is quite a bit of a science around how you approach amenities. And getting all of that right, and then it's the service bit. And I think that the conversations that we have as Four Seasons is, what is the brand really meaning to you? What's it bringing to your project? You can build a great building. You can sell that. What you're actually buying and investing with the brand is not just a name to put above the door on the marketing materials. It's the long-term promise to the buyers that you've got a group that has very high levels of competency, credibility, call it what you will, that's going to be delivered to the homeowners in the long term. So from our point of view, we go into projects on the basis that we are going to be the long-term property manager for those projects. So when you're buying with Four Seasons, you're getting Four Seasons. So we are there, generations down the track, as I say, marking this year 40th anniversary. We've been in this space for a long time. And so providing the value to those homeowners, understanding what they want as high net worths, what's key for them. And yes, of course, they want the services, but it's really the behind the scenes property management, looking after the asset or the capital planning programming that goes in. That's really the key to it. And so when you begin to unlock that conversation with developers and say, yes, you're getting the brand and it's going to have the premiums and everything like that, but really what you're selling is the long-term credibility and assurance that the promise of a life with Four Seasons is going to be delivered, because it is Four Seasons people that are going to be in that building for you in the long term.
We're going to dig into that in just a second, but Alex, let's get your take.
Majority of our owners are first-time owners, so there's a lot of hand-holding, but we do have a handful that it's their second or third time doing brand new residence, and I find those conversations quite refreshing, right? Because they have learned, and together we can brainstorm best practices and how to sort of really improve on their first project and how to bring new elements that can sort of elevate their second or third project. The other interesting thing I come across quite a bit in a handful of my owners around the world is they are multi-brand owners. Right, so they'll come to me, let's say it's X, Y, and Z competitor of yours. I did this project with them, and they offer this in their brand of residence. Can IHG do that? So it's also kind of helping us to evolve as we're sort of growing our business, because we are still quite young in the game under IHG after the acquisition. So it also becomes sort of a two-way dialogue, right? So together we can really come up with a really nice product that takes sort of the best practices from all their portfolio that they have already, and then we can sort of implement that and really elevate it to a new level. So I find that still the majority is still a lot of education, like Noel just said, right? It's and convincing. Sometimes when we're out and pitching, we have to convince them that why do you want to do brand new residence? So that's still the majority, but we do have quite a bit of owners that are second, third time brand new residential developers. So it helps the conversation go a little bit in a more brainstorming, I would say, approach to it, and it really helps us sort of build the business and really create some flagship properties for IHG, since we are sort of entering the market globally in urban and resort locations now.
Okay, let's do a really quick role play exercise. I'm going to pretend to be an owner with whom you've just signed a license agreement, and here's my question to each of you. Fantastic, I'm glad to be partnering with you. I love your brand. What are you going to do to help me sell these residences now? Do I get access to your list of customers, your loyalty database? What are you going to do? No.
Absolutely, that's part of the offering, right? So, I mean, what's interesting about the space is that everyone kind of takes very different approaches. I mean, hotel management agreements are hotel management agreements, but with residents, it's really quite fractured. For some, it's really just kind of a license deal, right? Here you sign. I'm going to throw you the binders of standards, and we'll check in with you from time to time. And here's a couple of brokers you can call and let us know when you're ready to turn over units. Where we are is that we are a partner every step of the way. So when it comes to sales and marketing, we want to see the marketing plan. We want to have input on it, right? One of the things that helps move the needle in those conversations where we're trying to convince an experienced residential developer to brand with us is that maybe you'll have maybe half of your inventory you'll sell to the local market, but what we can do is we can provide exposure to inbound buyers, right? So something like that, for Japan, is really appealing, So when we come to the sales, marketing planning, we may have opinions on, where you should invest some efforts and some time and money for marketing to our customer. Of course, we will support you with exposure to our customer database, our materials, of course, our website. We work very collaboratively on the material. It should be individual for each development, but it also should be aligned with our brand standards. And then through to training the brokers or whomever will be selling the residences, of course, designing, equipping the sales center, events, hosting special events to promote the development. So we have the full suite of services.
Yep.
It's more than just, oh, here's a license.
Yep.
Now go off and get your price premium. We're guardians of our brand.
Yep.
So every project is a reflection of our brand globally. So we have built a team that works through that process every step of the way with the developers.
So very comprehensive, awfully close to lead generation, but just stopping shy of it, right?
Yeah.
How does that compare in your world, Alex?
We definitely also, similar to what Noel described, we want to control the sales and marketing process and then be a partner from the beginning to end, right? So once the deal is signed, the first thing we do is a brand immersion and kickoff meeting. IHG has adopted a high touch approach. Just like Noel mentioned, we take it very seriously that our brand is going into the public and being sold, and therefore we want to ensure that our brand is reflected correctly in the public. And to do that, we start off, we have anyone working on marketing collaterals, the sales team as well, to come to the nearest on-brand hotel where we will create a 2 to 3 day brand immersion and kickoff meeting where we immerse them in the brand, have them experience it hands-on so that they can accurately sort of speak on behalf of IHG and that particular brand when they create the collaterals, when they go out to market it. At the same time, we also do what we call a kickoff, which is like a positioning brainstorming session where we understand the developer's vision. We have them walk us through their sales and marketing plan. And during these 2 to 3 day sessions, we sort of leave with an idea and a framework for both sides to work within, right? Then with that, we also just launched our ihgresidences.com website earlier this year, where a developer, once their website is approved by us, can link it to our website. So anyone sort of browsing it can sort of see the portfolio globally to see what's for sale. We're also sort of evolving that as we continue to go on. And then we also review, obviously, every piece of collateral that comes through, and then we also like to offer input, right? We also try and leverage the brand and the hotel teams that we have in market also when it comes to sort of the sales launch. And of course, we'll be at any sort of big events that they ask us to do as well.
40 plus years of experience, how does your approach differ, if at all?
We can be painful.
Okay, good to know that up front.
We can also be helpful. We're painful insofar as we have within our agreements a set of conditions that
Sure.
the project needs to get to a certain point before we will have our brand on that and it's presented to people. So I think again Jeff mentioned the governing documents earlier in a project. So yes, of course, getting all the brochures together, getting nice visuals, getting the renders done, the designs, all of that's great. But the governing documents are really how, that defines how the project's going to work and function. The rights that you have as a homeowner, the structure around the association, that then feeds into the service charge estimate that you're going to be sharing with buyers. So we want to make sure that that is well, understood. That work has been done by all the legal parties. And so when you go to market, you've actually got a robust set of materials with all of the details in place, ready for those conversations with the buyers. Because the minute you go out unprepared, you're going to lose credibility. Developer will, we will as a brand, and it always comes back on the brand. So point one is that yes, we want to be very helpful, but we do that in a certain way. And as I say, it's painful to the point that we want to make sure all of these things are in place. And sometimes developers are wanting to go to market at a certain timeline, and that's great. And we want to sort of, we want them to be successful because then we win as well. But everything has to be prepared properly before you do that. In terms of what we do to support that, yes, absolutely. Developers, when their kind of first conversations with us are, how much more can I sell with the brand? How quickly can I sell with your brand? What are you going to do to help me sell? So the first two, I think, are pretty clear, and that's fine. The third one is an area that we have actually pushed a lot more into in the last, I would say, the last 4 to 5 years. where previously, we were quite controlled about the way that we would distribute information on new projects through our database, whether that be our elite database, which is the sort of the top group, if you like, within Four Seasons, our existing homeowners. But now we're much better at unlocking that. We want to be commercially, a partner with the developers. The onus is still on them and their appointed sales teams, whether that's internal or external agents that they're using. They're the ones that are out there to sort of drive those sales. But we will be a part of that. And so we are now starting to actively generate leads to go through the project. So absolutely, to answer your question, yes, we will be very helpful to you.
So I think
painful at the start, but very helpful in the long
the key theme there is, painful aside, is that everyone's picked up on the owner's expectation and demand almost that you need to do more than just license a brand to me, right? I need you to be part of this journey, and I need you to proactively do something to bring people to the table and that I can convert to sales. Well, I'm going to stick with you, James, but I'm going to switch topics for a second. We're going to dive into the snake pit of property management and HOA management. You are, I suspect, on one end of a spectrum here. So can you touched on it already with your comments on we want to control everything, we want to manage everything, we want to deliver the Four Seasons experience from beginning to end, however that may be defined. Tell us about that a little bit more, and how is that useful and how is that challenging, especially in APAC with jurisdictions, legal frameworks? Just give us an insight.
So the kind of the DNA, if you like, of Four Seasons, as set out by Isidore Sharp, our founder, is based on 3 pillars, which evolved over a series of decades. Number one was, we don't want to be the biggest. We're just going to be focused on the best medium-sized hotels and residential properties. Number 2 was, we're going to focus on service. Everybody can do great buildings. We're going to bring them alive through service. The third was, we're going to create a culture which will be kind of imbue all of the sort of the service provision that we do. And the fourth is that comes into brand. So creating all of those things and that service culture that we have, that ethic that we have through all points of Four Seasons is critical to us. And that is what defines the brand, is the people. We are going to manage our properties, because if we don't, you jeopardize the brand. The name is above the door. A third party comes along and looks after it. Who knows what control there is? The homeowners associations ultimately will be sort of, it depends what the structure of the building is, but they will be self-governing. So they'll take decisions, but we will work with them every step of the way. So we're that being that long-term property manager is absolutely critical to us to not only ensure that the long-term experience of living with Four Seasons, again, matches all of the promises that are made at the sales table, but that's where we defend the brand, and that's where, the long-term success of the brand is based on, in the same way that we look after the hotels and we're fastidious about how we operate those and, manage the buildings as well as the experience. We do the same thing for a residential. And that's critical to us. If we can't be, there are licensing issues in certain countries, right? Yep. But ultimately, we would find a structure whereby that service and that management to the homeowners is delegated into Four Seasons. So we are there providing the on-site, personnel that will be looking after the people. If we can't do that, then we'll walk away from a project. Wow. Safeguarding the brand is everything.
Yeah. And examples of jurisdictions where you have to bring in that Malaysia as an example?
Yeah, so that's one. So our property in Kuala Lumpur, so Henry Butcher are the overall property manager there for it's a big mixed-use property with other elements to it. But for the looking after the actual kind of Four Seasons residences in there, that all gets delegated through to us to do that. So again, it's Four Seasons people that are looking after you as a homeowner there.
Right. Alex?
We have more of a hybrid approach, right? Just because legally in certain jurisdiction to do the actual homeowner association management requires a license, which being a publicly listed company, we don't have the general licensing to do that. So we always want to ensure our servicing, like James has touched on, is delivered by IHG personnel. So for the most part, we have our front of house staff, if you will, right? The residential general manager, the number 2, concierge, or pool attendant, all under IHG staff, typically from the hotel. All right. If it's a standalone, we'll have at least our residential GM be employed by IHG, supervising the team underneath that. Where we are sort of evolving right now, which we're not typically handling right now, is the exact HOA manager, which is the accounting and managing the annual general meeting, right, in certain jurisdictions. Having said that, we are exploring that to sort of in the North America region, where it's the most sophisticated, where we want to sort of test run that there and then sort of apply around the world. But even with sort of doing all the deals that we've been looking at around the world, many jurisdictions have sort of their idiosyncrasies and whether you can or can't, right? Dubai definitely has a very controlled structure, and so we all kind of follow that. Southeast Asia varies from country to country. So we, at the very least, want to provide the experience for when the resident walks through the door, right? We want to know that they get the service delivery that they paid for, the services that they were promised, and the only way to do that is to control and hire that staff with IHG branding. And then the technical accounting and sort of the homeowner association management, budgeting, anything that really requires a local license, that we typically partner with a local sort of property management company to just handle that small portion.
So full sort of management and control, hybrid approach. Where are you on that spectrum, Noel?
Our model is to have full control.
Okay.
So on providing the services and on the administrative matters. We are running into some issues in some markets with licensing, where we have to be creative. And so long as we can be comfortable that if there's any services that we're not providing, that we have control over their provision, then we make it work. With some of our experience, we found that sometimes the developer has a residential license management company. They may own the hotel, so that gives us a mechanism to create a control framework. And we know the parties, of course, perhaps may get a bit more challenging with standalone. But if we cannot have full confidence that the full experience will be up to our standards, we will pass on the project.
Yeah, so interesting mix there. I guess the key theme being brand integrity is paramount, right? And you'll figure out the means to an end, and the end being brand integrity. We have a few minutes left. I want to touch on two things very, very briefly. One is, and I think we already have, which is standalone. Yes, you've done it. You'll continue to do it. I think same in your case,
Yes, we
right?
have two, and we're continuing to do it. Yes.
No.
Yes, we just opened our first standalone project in Beverly Hills. And we have another 4 or so in the pipeline. We'll do standalone. I mean, we're in a different phase of our growth trajectories. So we're not looking in our growth. There are a lot of markets where we don't have a presence yet for hotels. So you'll see more co-located mixed use as a vehicle for our residential growth. But in some places, particularly Europe, where you have smaller heritage buildings, we have a strong presence there. We might do residences in a different location, and we'll do standalone in particularly, we have a lot of emphasis on those really affluent residential communities. They're so affluent that maybe they wouldn't take a hotel. So we're focused on those kinds of locations for standalone.
Okay. To close it out, I just want to get your views on something that came up earlier a couple of times, and I suspect it will continue to come up, and that is non-hotel brands in this space. KP gave us his take, which was pretty entertaining. So what's your take, in particular around automotive brands or clubs and all of that, and also equally developers coming up with their own brands? So where do you think the future lies? Noel, we'll start with you and I'll work our way to James.
I feel good about what our proposition is, because for us it's about service. Yes, I mean, I think Bentley is doing branded residences. It's a fine automobile, but I don't know what that does for service, right? So you could put any brand on anything, but you will never get the service, the excellence, the consistency, the recognition that you could get from a world-class hotel or hospitality company. I think it is interesting when you get into maybe design brands and actually fitness, wellness. I think that's interesting. But if you're going to live in a designed house, you still want to you want to have your own choice. You want your home to reflect your taste, your sensibilities. You might also not just want to have a Bentley. You might want to have another car. So I think with what hotel branded residences offer, you get the best of everything.
Mm-hmm. Your take, Alex?
I agree with that, right? I think the advantage of a hotel brand residence is the service, right? We're in the hospitality business. We know how to cater to guests, and we take that and elevate it to residents that live there permanently. I think the sort of the automobile brands and the fashion houses are more like a franchise model. Basically, you're licensing the brand, you're putting it on the building, but then all of that servicing is to third party, like the three of us just discussed, right? There, we want to sort of control that as much as possible so that can go haywire sort of quickly. I think those work best in markets where there's high net worth individuals that buy as an investment, don't actually live there, right? So if you look at certain market trophy assets, right? Like you see a lot of that sort of, I guess, in London and in Dubai, right? Where they buy it, they're not there most of the time, but I think if it's really going to be an owner-occupied model, which is the majority of our projects in Asia Pacific, a hotel brand has that advantage of providing the service, providing the security, and sort of controlling the entire lifestyle, right? We sell it as we want. Our promise is we want you to live a branded lifestyle at a hotel 24/7, right? If you want a burger at 2 a.m., you're going to get that from the hotel. A fashion house or a automobile doesn't have a hotel to sort of provide those services to them.
Closing remarks, James?
Echo what's been said. I think, for me, the value proposition of the other brands in the space is just unclear from a long-term buyer standpoint. I get it from the developer wanting to create some distinction in the market. But I think when you look at how, again, back to how projects are set up, and all the devil is in the detail of these things. So service charges include, for us, a clear capital provision for ongoing works. There's a reserve fund in there, right? You maintain the building in the long term. And, we're looking at the long-term interest, as well as creating a point of distinction and premium, in pricing. It's the long-term interest of a project. And it's not clear to me, and obviously I've not looked at the agreements that a lot of the brands have, but it's not clear to me how they're safeguarding the long-term interest of those people that have bought. So you may bear with the notion that, okay, I aspire to that design, or I like that car manufacturer. So 10 years down the track, what are those buildings going to look like? That's what I would ask.
Okay. Unsurprising unanimous consensus there that the hotel brand representatives think that the future for hotel brands and residences is strong and bright.
I'd be out of a job if I didn't say that.
I think we're going to hear more about the non-hotel brands in Rian's panel later in the afternoon, so I don't want to steal anyone's thunder. I thank my panelists for their time today. This was really fun. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.